Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Skull Session Recruiting Podcast brought to you by BuckeyeHuddle.com. I'm Marc Givler. Got Tony Gerdeman here with me today. They've done it again. Ohio State has landed another five-star commitment, Na'eem Offord out of Birmingham, Alabama, which is a whole other story we'll get into a bit later. But they've done it again. And you get into these rhythms in recruiting, and it's just like, I guess, like when Steph Curry gets hot, it's like throwing a rock in the ocean right now. It just feels like they can't miss after, kind of a dreadful month of December there. Everyone was down. Here we go. I mean, the top two corners in the country have committed to Ohio State roughly, 4.5 weeks apart. Tony, just how good is this corners class right now? And just what does all this mean?
Well, I think one thing to take note of it is that it's not just two Ohioans. Last year, you have or this year, I guess 2024 class with Bryce West and Aaron Scott, two fantastic corners, but Ohioans. Here, it's a little like going and getting Jeff Okudah out of Texas and Shaun Wade out of Florida. You're going to Texas for Sanchez and, of course, Alabama for Offord. So, this is a national reach, and it's a reach that isn't just national, but it's a place where everybody else is trying to get these guys as well. So for Tim Walton to be able to do this, and we can go ahead and give some credit to Tim Walton, everybody else is, including the families, the players, and it's pretty impressive. Obviously, a long way to go, but it's rare to get the top two guys in the and just depending on which service, it's like either Sanchez is one or Sanchez is two, and Offord is one or Offord is two. And, I go back to the 2017 class with Shaun Wade and Jeff Okudah as Okudah 1, Wade 2. I don't know how many other times it's been done. And obviously, like we said, there's still a ways to go. But might be good for a study to go back and look to see how often the top two corners end up in the same class.
And they've got Blake Woodby out of Maryland, out of Baltimore, who's one of the top 10 corners in the class, who's a fantastic player himself. So this is special. This is kind of Heartline-esque what Tim Walton is doing right now on the recruiting trail. It looks like Brian Hartline finally has some competition there over at the Woody. I mean, what can we say about the transition of the cornerbacks room the last couple of years? I mean, it is not that long ago that this was a disaster.
It's not long ago at all. I posted on the Huddle message board earlier today, actually, looking at the starting secondary from 2020 and in 2021, 2022, and 23. And boy, it is a stark difference when you go to the national championship game in 2020 and your starting safeties are Marcus Williamson and Marcus Hooker. And your corners are Seven Banks and Shaun Wade. And then the next year in 2021, you're looking at Seven Banks, Cam Brown, and Denzel Burke finally gets the job as the true freshman that year. But you're also starting at safety that year in 2021, Marcus Williamson, Cam Martinez, Bryson Shaw, and then just to continue to see this buildup of talent, especially at corner where they went silent for a while. They went quiet for a while, whether Taver Johnson, Kerry Combs, the recruiting kind of dipped a little. Transfers obviously have played a part. But as it looks right now, it's just class on class on class that Tim Walton is stacking. And now you just got to wonder who's out there in 2026. It's time to just already move on. 2025 is in the bag, but it's been a pretty remarkable set of a couple of years for Tim Walton. And again, not all of it's Ohio. Sometimes you can really get into a groove because you have location. Like when Thad Matta got hot at Ohio State early in his career, he had Ohio guys and he had Indiana guys, and he had that short little footprint that he could go to. This is a national footprint, and a footprint that Ohio State doesn't actually ever really get into in terms of Alabama.
Yeah, this is reminding me of the mid to late 90s when essentially Ohio State would have 2 first-round corners, and then their nickel would be like a freshman who was going to be a first-round pick in 3 years. That's like that. This is where they're at right now. You look at their secondary right now, and I see a lot of future first-round picks in that secondary. I see some guys who aren't starting right now who have a chance to be a first-round pick, first, second-round pick here in the next couple of years. So the depth is just incredible. First let's get into the Offord, toolbox here. He's very much like Devin Sanchez. They are both 6'1.5", 6'2", 185 pounds. They can run. They love to be in man-to-man coverage, but they can also hit. They can play the ball. To an extent, they're almost carbon copies of each other. But the one thing I would say here that's kind of interesting is Offord has a little bit more of the free safety type of skill set. I know there's been some talk about maybe him playing free safety in college. I think right now it's corner, but regardless of how this all finalizes, with some of the other guys we're going to talk about here in a minute and what they've got right now committed, they're going to have to fit the puzzle pieces together somehow, because you can't play 6 corners on the outside. I don't think there's a defensive scheme that allows for that. So they're going to have to mix and match some guys, but I think this gives them 2 star, prototypes, but it also, I think, gives them a guy who might be able to be your next Caleb Downs, even if that's what it takes to get your best 5 out there.
And watching Offord, I saw a lot of off coverage, a lot of man, a lot of zone. So he's got his eyes on the quarterback as he's dropping back, and certainly can cover ground, triggers quickly. So I can see that assessment. And then he's a playmaker. When the ball's in the air, it's just as much his as anybody else's. And then he can do stuff with it. You see him as a punt returner as well. Just an explosive playmaker. And so I'm of the opinion that you bring in as many as will come in terms of corners, because if it doesn't work out at corner, you can always become a safety. And if it doesn't work out at free safety, you can become a strong safety. There are certain levels to this. I remember what Jordan Fuller was brought in as. He was an athlete as a recruit, but his first couple of days in practice were at corner, and then he moved to safety. Great job by Ohio State finding the right spot for him. Bring him in, see where they go, and it's not atypical for a guy who is viewed as a corner by the recruiting services to end up at safety. You just got to find a place to fit you best, and a lot of guys will be like, "Hey, I want to play, so where is that? Where is that opportunity for me?" And looking at the roster right now, they're just going to be churning through guys, and 3-4 year guys, and sometimes 1 year guys because of the portal either coming in or going. So really, you have to bring in as many as will come in, because who knows who's staying for how long, and you still want to have that level, and you still want to create that competition in the room and with the receivers. So you figure it out. Ryan Day will talk about, we want 8 defensive ends, we want 8 defensive tackles, we want 5 running backs. I don't know the exact number of corners they want, because I'm sure that also fluctuates with, well, this guy's also a nickel, this guy can play outside. So there are so many different areas, especially in Jim Knowles' defense, where you have 5 defensive backs, and it's not atypical for there to be a 6th out there as a dime, and the versatility that they have playing 16 games a season now, you're going to want as many as you can have.
Yeah, I think it's almost like offensive tackles at this point. You recruit as many tackle bodies as you can, because you can always move them inside. It's kind of the same philosophy there with corners right now, especially. We've seen kind of the emergence of the nickel position, not just at Ohio State. We've seen the emergence of the nickel position, in the NFL, has become it used to be like a throwaway position. He's just a nickel. He's a slot corner. It used to be like a derogatory term. It was like an insult almost. And now guys are being recruited, drafted for that specific role because of all these high-powered offenses. And especially now that, a lot of offensive coordinators have taken Justin Jeffersons and Marvin Harrisons and guys like that and just put them in the slot to create mismatches. Well, now we need to have a good slot corner. We can't just throw our, guy. You can't just throw anyone who's 5'9" and can move in there. We got to have a legitimate guy in there. So there's a lot of value, I think, to being able to be a little bit versatile within a secondary. So they're going to have a lot of options here. Obviously, this is a huge commitment. It's the Alabama thing's fascinating to me. I'm trying to remember if they've ever. I mean, I'm guessing they have. I'm guessing at least if nothing else, maybe under Woody Hayes or something, they maybe got a kid from Alabama. But I cannot remember. I'm trying to remember the last kid that, and I know Quinshon Judkins is from Alabama. That's a totally different scenario. I'm trying to remember a high school recruit from Alabama, and certainly I think I'm safe in saying this. They've never recruited a kid this good out of Alabama, out of high school.
Well, here's a story for you, because Tom Moore at the Ozone put together a list of the most recent Buckeye from every single state. And so the most recent Ohio State player from Alabama was Willie Salter in 2001. He was a walk-on. So in terms of recruited players, you have to go back to 1981, Dante Wheat. So
it wasn't quite Woody. That would have been Earl Bruce, right?
Correct. And then so Tom tweets this out, and then fullback from the 81 team, Vaughn Broadnex, tweets Tom, says, "Who's Dante Wheat?" And it's that dude never showed up. So you even really have to go back further to find, and Tom didn't bother going back any further. We won't go into that on, shirking your duties, but this is how far back you have to go. And you have to go back even further to find a contributor. So, I mean, you're talking, 45 years essentially since they last signed a player from Alabama, and they still have to do it though.
And that's our next thing. Look, celebrate the commitment. There's no reason to not be excited about this if you're an Ohio State fan. There's no reason to sit here and have a negative attitude about it because it's so early, and that's our job. But this is not going to be, and I've kind of laid this out the last few weeks. I've said, look, the conditions are right for them to do something like this right now. You've got Alabama in transition. You've got Auburn just really not all that competitive right now. You're rolling on the recruiting front. Tim Walton's doing a great job. You're producing first-round picks. You've got Devin Sanchez and Blake Woodby. So it's an appealing, situation to kind of walk into and kind of play opposite Devin Sanchez, because you figure Woodby would be the nickel guy. So there's a lot here that conditions-wise that I think set this up to be possible. But the SEC schools are not just going to be oh, good luck at Ohio State. Good luck in Columbus. It was nice knowing you. We will leave you alone for the next 10 months because you're committed to Ohio State, and we wouldn't want to try and tamper with that. So buckle up is what I'm saying. This will be, I think, at the best case scenario, this will be Edric Houston. Where you sign him, but it's, it's not always pleasant to follow for a fan. So I think there are going to be some very, very compelling recruiting pitches from the SEC schools moving forward here the next 10 months. And now, which is kind of I use this example forever. This isn't just this kid. Now all the other schools know who they have to recruit against.
Yeah. You mentioned the downturn or the good timing. It's very similar to 2017, that class when Ohio State went into Texas, and Texas was down, Texas A&M was down. Go get J.K. Dobbins, Jeff Okudah, Baron Browning, Elijah Gardner. They were able to go in there and get some guys that kind of in the dark of the night, basically, while the in-state schools are struggling. But yeah, if they can pull this one off, I mean, that would be Well, based on their history, the heist of the century, because because it's not something that happens. And we've talked in the past about players from Louisiana, not counting Jair Brown, but if you go back to Nader Abdallah in, I don't know, 2003 or something like that. And it's just not been a big boon down there. And it's really crazy because the talent in Alabama has really picked up in terms of high school recruiting. Like, they will have 10% of the top 100 just about, moving forward every given year here. And so it's like, why isn't Ohio State involved more there? They have success in Georgia. Why can't they have success in Alabama? Why can't they have success in Louisiana? And maybe now with the way things are NIL wise, the way things are at Alabama, like, I just wonder how much of the last nearly 2 decades of college football was impacted by Nick Saban's presence. And now that you've thrown him out of the alignment, where does the gravitational pull for the rest of the nation go?
Yeah, I mean, it's one big power struggle. It's like almost when like not to get morbid here or something, but like when a dictator dies or whatever, and there's like this power vacuum and that has to be filled, and all the rebel factions are trying to fill the power vacuum, and that's kind of what's happening right now with Nick Saban's retirement. And I do think it'll be interesting kind of moving forward now. The Big Ten and the SEC have really just pulled away from the pack at this point. Like, those are the two dominant brands, two dominant conferences now in college football. And now you're going to have all these playoff games. I think we're going to have a lot of Big Ten versus SEC playoff games. Some of those will be held on college campuses, which is going to be unbelievable for the sport. And I do wonder how much this could impact maybe Ohio State's ability. They've done a good job in Georgia, but how could this maybe impact Ohio State's ability to get into places like, the Birmingham area, which are producing a ton of players every year? I look around the country and I think, the two states, in my opinion, right now that are rising the fastest in terms of just becoming these highly, these top 6 or 7 or 8 developmental states for high school football prospects are North Carolina and Alabama. And a lot of that's population shifts and things like that. But, they've already got a foot in Georgia. They have a pretty good foot in North Carolina. They get enough guys out of there to be competitive there. But like, Alabama's kind of the final frontier here. Does this open the door? Maybe. They got to sign him first. I think first of all he's got to sign. But if Judkins goes off this year, off to the NFL, he'll say nice things about Ohio State. If Offord signs and they're able, who knows what that could mean? I mean, we've kind of seen that happen in certain parts of the country before, where 1 or 2 guys have some success somewhere, and it just kind of snowballs for people. Like, even a place like South Carolina has been able to get this weird foothold in the DMV, and so it can happen. But I do wonder, just the nationalization of the sport, the money now flowing to players either via NIL or what's even more fascinating to me is like, when this newsflash, this is going to happen. Ultimately, the money's going to flow from the schools, and the players are probably going to be considered employees. How does that change things? Because there's a lot of guys who I think, well, I'm just going to stay, like Dexter Lawrence was never going to leave the South, and guys like that who, well, if I'm getting paid, it's kind of like the NFL thing. No one really cares where they get drafted. Right. All these homebodies that stay home for college, and then it's like they get drafted by, some like the Patriots or, some cold weather team. And I don't care. I'm getting paid. Now I'm living my dream. So I do wonder how all that could impact Ohio State moving forward.
I don't think it's going to be a bad thing. They say what you want about how quickly they adjust. They always have the means to adjust, and they do. And obviously football is important, and it's going to remain important. And so they're going to do what they can to stay on top of things. And just listening to President Ted Carter and new incoming athletic director Ross Bjork a couple weeks ago, saying Ohio State deserves to have a large voice in what is happening in college sports. And we've seen this past week with the Big Ten and SEC forming an advisory group. Ohio State is going to be part of that decision-making process. They're going to have a voice. And they're, like you said, it's going to be the big two. It's going to be everybody else. If you want in, it's probably going to the velvet rope outside the club. They'll pick and choose who gets to come in, and you go from there. And it's going to be a different operational system in the next few years, 5 to 7, 3 to 5, 2 to 3 years, depending on how quickly things move. And I think once stuff starts happening, let's just get it all done now. And whether that's, government or just breaking off and creating new rules and then figuring out a way to operate in terms of employee status or non-employee status, the key thing is that it will open up Alabama to Ohio State. And really, if all of these steps just simply open up the borders of Alabama for Ohio State, I'm sure Buckeye fans will be fine with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is the one thing, I think people fear change. And I think some schools should be scared. Ohio State's not one of those. Ohio State, Alabama, this is true at every level of society. When overhauls are done from a legislation or a rules standpoint, the bigwigs never suffer. So whatever the new rules are going to be, it's not going to be bad to have the most resources. Ohio State's going to have, Alabama's going to have, USC's going to have, the rules aren't probably going to help, Akron. They're probably going to help Ohio State and Penn State and Michigan. So I just wouldn't really worry about that too much. I think Ohio State's in position to benefit from whatever changes come along. So last thing we want to get into here, this was kind of an unexpected thing. If you look back a month or two ago, this was not really a thing I think most people thought would happen. It's certainly not in February. So naturally, there's going to be this reaction of, okay, well, Dorian Brew, Trey McNutt, these are Ohio guys. I know Brew's in Texas right now, but these are Ohio guys. What does this all mean? And I do think it's going to mean something. I mean, not necessarily from Ohio State's standpoint. Ohio State's going to take Dorian Brew and Trey McNutt. They're not going to shut the door on those guys. But this is one of those things. I say this with Heartline every year when people draw up their mock receiver classes and it's 4 or 5-star guys. And I always say, he'll get 2 or 3 of those 4. He's not going to get all 4 because eventually, after 2 or 3 commitments, one of those 4 is going to look at this and say, let me go to Alabama or Clemson and be their top guy in the class and not be the 3rd-ranked guy in the class. I think eventually that is something that could come into play here, and maybe not even for Brew or McNutt, maybe for some of the next guys. I think Marc Zachary's going to Notre Dame at this point. The kid out of Indiana who's a high 4-star kid who's kind of been up. That's been a Notre Dame Ohio State thing. I think that's going to happen. So I think there's going to be fallout here. Again, I think Marc Zachary to Notre Dame's a pretty safe bet at this point. The Dorian Brew thing was not, he was supposed to announce late January. That was unrelated to this. This was Dorian kind of doing what was best for Dorian, wanting to make some more visits, check out a few more national programs. Didn't want to do that while he was committed somewhere. And then now Offord's in. I mean, I still like where they stand for those 2 guys. But it's going to, again, if you are on the bubble right now, if you're going to be the 5th or 6th defensive back that's going to commit this, I think it's going to, again, the Marc Zacharys of the world, I think there will be some fallout from this at some point on their recruiting board. And they still have Fahim Delane out there, the number 1 safety that they're after. So if they can convince all those guys to get in this class, I think it'll be the best defensive back class of all time.
Yeah, I mean that's another research project. Find something that is close to that, and a lot of this is we may project somebody a corner to safety, but if that guy is committed to I am a corner, I see that as my NFL future. That's where the money is. That's where the real money is, being a number 1 corner. And if they start seeing 2 other corners in there, it's not just them in their heads talking about maybe I should look elsewhere. It's every other school that is recruiting them. As Urban Meyer said, it might be the 3rd uncle that is also then getting into the head. It's going to be your NIL agent that is saying, you know what, you can, as the third guy here, this is what you're limited to in terms of NIL. As the number one guy here, this is what the last guy did. Here's what Kool-Aid McKinstry was able to do. Do you want to be Kool-Aid or do you want to be the third guy in this class? And so there are a lot of different voices that are getting into this thing, which is, again, another reason why Tim Walton doing what he's doing is pretty impressive, because there are so many things to consider right now. But we'll see how this goes. And you're talking about all of these guys, the same, like Trey McNutt, as you said, is he looking like a safety? Fahim Delane, safety. Can you get 3 of each? And that would probably be an ideal class, but you probably get 2 of each, and then the other 2 go somewhere else because they don't want to be the third guy. They'd rather be the first guy. But then also, if you want to be the first guy, you could also commit right now. And so it's kind of your own doing. And maybe some of these guys, Trey McNutt being a legacy, he's like, I'll enjoy my time, but I know where I'm going, and I'm not saying he does. But there are different thought processes for all of these guys. But if you want in, the best time to do it is to make sure that you're going to get in and do it while they're still available spots. And all of these guys we're talking about will probably have availability forever. But if you want to feel better about your standing, maybe do it sooner than later. But again, they can decommit at any time. They can hit the portal at any time. And, some of these guys are going to be 1-year rentals, and sometimes you're going to be bringing in a 1-year rental, or in the case of Caleb Downs, a 2-year rental. And, you just, the plates are constantly spinning. You just got to try to keep them up on the pole.
Yeah. So one of the most fascinating storylines is going to continue here. Again, this is a double-edged kind of story right now. It's going to be who can they get? How close can they push this to being the best defensive back class, maybe the modern recruiting era? And then the second part of that is going to be, how do they hold on to all these guys? Mm-hmm. Because no one's going to stop recruiting Devin Sanchez. No one's going to stop recruiting Na'eem Offord. You've got Fahim Delane. It's a national recruiting battle. Dorian Brew's a national recruiting battle. Even Trey McNutt's a national recruiting battle. So you're going to have big programs trying to pull your guys. And you've got to protect this now for the next 10 months. I mean, this isn't November. It's not just hold on for a few more weeks. They've got to hold on for 10 more months. So this is all going to be fun.
Yeah. And not only do you have to hold on, you might have guys that want to come aboard, but they're like, no, you've got Offord. I'm going to go somewhere else. And then you lose Offord in 8 months. And now you've also lost the guy that went somewhere else. So there's all kinds of subterfuge and
or you got to tell a kid like that maybe you would have taken them 2 months ago, that they can't come in right now because you got to wait on Dorian Brew and Trey McNutt and Fahim Delane and see what they want to do. And then that kid's going to go somewhere. So there are a million moving parts to this. And this is a huge, like, domino right here. Like these 2 dominoes they've landed the last month are enormous for the national landscape. It's going to create, I think, a lot of chaos, because now you start to get down to the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th corner. Like, you start to get down these other corners who are great players, but it's going to be a feeding frenzy now for those. Maybe those guys are happy about this, that they're both going to the same school, because now those guys are like, oh my goodness, like I could pick anywhere in the country and be the number 1 guy for them. And so there's all sorts of moving parts here. Recruiting is so fascinating with how the spider web, kind of the little branches of the web or whatever go out. And so this will be interesting, obviously. But again, like, huge news for Ohio State. Big, certainly a surprise given where this was a few months ago. This was not a guy who I think was on a lot of people's, even the most optimistic people's mock classes, back in like November, December, I don't think would have had this be their setup right now. So Tim Walton continues to eat on the recruiting trail. And we continue to have big commitments almost every week now. So keep it locked in at BuckeyeHuddle.com. We're going to have more on this commitment. We're going to be talking about it all week. Tony and Tom on Buckeye Weekly. If you're not following them on both the YouTube channel and on iTunes, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. And again, you can download the Skull Session Recruiting Podcast on your podcast platform of choice as well. And be sure to hit the like button and the subscribe button if you're watching this on youtube.com/Buckeye Huddle. But thanks everyone for watching and listening, and we will talk to you again soon.